Hello and welcome everybody to another
Well,
marketing session with us here at Dream Data. Our show is called Attributed. So if you've signed up to the conversation with John and I, go search for that where you listen to podcasts. I think this is the podcast where there's been the longest distance between the two speakers that we've done.
right.
I'm in New York today, where the sun is about to set, and
Right.
John is in Australia.
Yeah.
We're here today to talk about B2B marketing and particularly the 9 to 5 rule, which you were part of coining, John. I know there's a story
Indeed.
behind that, so I'm looking forward to getting into that.
Yes.
And I at least have been following particularly the books that the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute has produced, which is the one you have in your background, I can see, called How
Yes.
Brands Grow.
Yes.
But for those who've never heard about the book or you or your institute, John, could you maybe just tell the audience a little bit about your own background and what it is that you do at the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute?
Sure. Yes. So I'm a senior researcher and one of the associate directors of Ehrenberg-Bass. So just a really quick snapshot so the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute is a university research institute funded by a consortium of corporations around the world. So, businesses that are in packaged goods, media companies, B2B services. They support us by basically paying a fee each year for which they get access to the discoveries that we make. And we take that funding, we pool it, and that funds a series of long-term research programs into various aspects of buyer behavior, brand performance, advertising effectiveness, cost-efficient media, B2B marketing, and isn't different to consumer marketing, and so on. So we have a very big team, over 60 researchers who do, a wide variety of research topics and programs. We're based in Adelaide, which is a beautiful city. Currently, just at the start of autumn, it's still very warm here. I think it's going to be 30 degrees Celsius today. And at any one point in time, a lot of the researchers in the Institute are traveling because our sponsors are located all over the world. So it's a very fun teamwork environment here at Ehrenberg-Bass.
That's fantastic. And I think one of the things that excites me about our conversation, John, is that I think I'm a heavy user of LinkedIn, and in my little B2B marketing bubble, there's so many opinions about this works in B2B or this doesn't work, or brand building is great, or you need to capture demand, or there's all these opinions floating around constantly. But what you
Yes.
guys are actually doing at the Institute is actual science. You don't
Yes.
just have opinions, you actually also have to provide evidence that
Yes.
stuff's working. So
Yes.
how, maybe just kind of also just to warm up the listeners, how do you do marketing science?
Yes, good question. So we base our approach on Andrew Ehrenberg's pioneering work in the 1950s and 1960s. So our namesake Andrew Ehrenberg was a very illustrious consumer researcher with background in maths and statistics, and he had this sort of old-fashioned scientific approach, which is you study phenomena and you look for results that repeat. Like if I do a study, I get a result. Well, if I do it again, does it repeat again? If
That's
I try it in
science.
another country, does it repeat again? Different contexts. And so by doing those sorts of things, you can generate knowledge that is reusable knowledge. So, a brand manager in a pet food category could find it just as useful as a brand manager selling financial services in a B2B context in Western Europe or something like that. So the idea is to study marketing phenomena, don't stop at just one finding, see if the results generalize, see how far they generalize, and then we think we've developed something that marketers in general could use.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one question then is kind of how do the people that are not involved in science then take the science that you, or the truth that you guys kind of discover,
Yes.
and kind of transfer that to everyday decisions.
Yes. Yes. So yes, you were right in that you can take a discovery, like for example, well, one of the discoveries that kind of preceded the idea of 95/5 rule was an Andrew Ehrenberg discovery, which was what we call the distribution or the shape of purchases in say consumer markets. So Ehrenberg worked for one of the pioneering consumer panel companies in the UK. And he was tabulating the incidence of purchases in a category. So how many people buy once a year, twice a year, 3, 4, 5 times a year. And what he found was it followed a particular pattern or statistical distribution. And it turns out that's the finding. And then that was replicated across dozens of different categories. It's replicated in consumer markets as well as B2B. And then, so that's a simple finding. So I suppose that's a hallmark is, doing good science means, we're trying to simplify a complex world. So the fact that consumer purchases follow an NBD pattern is a very simple finding, but then translating what it means to marketers, there's a bit of a skill involved in that. And it could be that takes some education and some repetition, but the idea that if consumer purchases are NBD, that says there's an awful lot of consumers who only buy very, very infrequently. Well, okay, so the implication for marketing is there's a lot of scope to forget about our brand, right? So if there's a whole bunch of people who are buying our category only once or twice a year, let alone maybe our brand even less frequently than that, then that tells us a lot about the extent to which buyers are kind of knowledgeable and involved, and marketing fads and ideas about consumers are highly emotionally invested in us, for instance. Well, that seems inconsistent with the hard fact that so many people are just buying extremely infrequently. It seems a little bit illogical to think that they would be forming strong emotional connections with brands. So the findings flow to really useful marketing implications.
Yeah, and probably to be fair as well, that's also where kind of you need to buy the course with the institute, where you have the knowledge, but you can also then have conversations with the people that seeks the courses that you guys are selling, right?
Yes, that's right. Yes. So we are a university research institute, so we've got obviously a student body here in Adelaide. But yes, as perhaps I'll mention at the end of the podcast, we are now in executive education, and so interested listeners can come to a 3-day intensive various places later in the year.
Super cool. Just before we jump into the 95/5 rule, which is one of the things we've said we're going to discuss in depth today. Yes. Given that I think you've been doing science for more than 20 years, 25 years even, marketing science in particular. Do you have a favorite finding or a peculiar finding that really surprised you that you can anecdotally talk about?
Well, I can think of two. So I've we talk about the idea of scientists, and probably marketers too, should be simultaneously kind of open-minded but skeptical, right? You should be thinking, well, that's an interesting idea, but where's the proof? And so there's something that I had been thinking about for a long time, and indeed, Institute Director Byron Sharp had written extensively about the Net Promoter and the idea that, Net Promoter seemed, overly hyped by the people that developed it. And so I, from 2020, I spent a lot of time doing 3 studies on Net Promoter, or more broadly, the relationship between word of mouth and brand growth, right? Because, it's sold in Reicheld's books and articles that, Net Promoter is the one metric you need to grow, etc.
Yeah.
I really looked hard. I assembled a lot of data, analyzed it in all sorts of ways, and I don't see that net promoter or word of mouth metrics are a lead indicator of growth. So it's kind of simultaneously surprising yet not so surprising, because I'm a little bit of a skeptic. It seems to be more something that just accompanies growth. You know, as you are growing, you are picking up new customers, and perhaps brand new customers are a little bit more likely to also tell their friends because it's something new to talk about. So that's one.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting because that net promoter score has really been riding a success all over the world for the past, I don't know, 10 or 20 years or something like that. And when you say brand growth, is that another word for revenue?
Revenue growth. Revenue growth.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I have 3 studies published on that, and interested readers can find those. At least the abstracts for them are available.
Yeah. You get complaints from the authors of the net promoter score then?
There's certainly been some debates about it, both with other researchers, but also some institute sponsors, you know, have been quite invested in the net promoter and trying to explain to them that, look, you know, it's not a bad thing. Like if you have a high score, high net promoter score, it's not a bad thing. Does it mean that that's an indication that you will grow in the future? No, it's not. No. So, you know, you need other metrics to be embedded in your kind of marketing system, and you need to be pursuing those in order to grow.
Super cool.
The second maybe surprising finding was to do with cigarettes. Now we don't have tobacco companies as sponsors, but I obtained a very large data set of purchasing of cigarettes in the US.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised to see that cigarettes even follow what we call the NBD. So the single biggest buyer group for cigarettes in the US are people that buy once a year. And to me, that was surprising, because, you know, there's a lot of literature around cigarettes are, you know, an addictive product.
Yeah.
But that's kind of not quite as consistent with the idea that, well, why would a lot of people be buying maybe once or twice a year? But what that tells us is that the pool of smokers is maybe way bigger than conventional, medical related research would be, because it's typically done with surveys. But when you look at people's purchasing behavior, it looks like there are a lot of people who smoke very, very occasionally. So there's a question here. I'd always thought net promoter was less about growth and more about driving retention LTV. Well, it's kind of about both, but, you know, Reichelt's articles were principally about growth, right? The number one, like the one metric you need to grow. But he was saying the mechanism for growth will be, well, your customers will be so happy that they'll recommend you to other people. Yeah. Now, they're very, very happy, so they'll keep buying you, but then they'll act as a kind of like a free marketing department and drive other people to you. But I mean, we simply don't see that. No, the podcast isn't about word of mouth, but I mean, when people say that they're willing to recommend or likely to recommend, most people who say that don't go on and recommend.
You need to have somebody who scores it 11 out of on the NPS score or something like that then.
Yes, that's right.
That's 2 wonderful anecdotes, John.
Yes.
So if we jump to or change chapter to this, the 95-5 rule, I would love to hear kind of how it came about, how the conversation with LinkedIn started, and so forth.
Yeah, great.
But maybe we should maybe can I ask you to like very simply explain what the rule is, and then we can drill a little bit into kind of how the collaboration and the fame of the rule came about afterwards.
Yes, that's right. All right. So, I mean, it's something that like we had known about and almost taken for granted here at the Institute, because as I'd mentioned, I mean, Andrew Ehrenberg published a study in the late 1950s showing what he called the pattern of consumer purchases. So in consumer goods, it's huge numbers of people who buy only very, very occasionally. And that tells us, well, a lot of buyers are only in the market maybe once or twice a year in consumer goods. And we knew from work with B2B companies examining things like, say, interpurchase cycles, right? So if you say, look, here's a business-to-business category, and the average interpurchase cycle is, say, 2 years. Okay, so the average client will, enter the market or review their, supplier list or call for tenders or whatever, say once every 2 years. Well, once every 2 years means 50% in the market in any 1 year, which means about 12% in any 1 quarter, which is about 4% in any month. So the idea of 95.5 was to simply take that knowledge and package it in an accessible way that would resonate with marketers, and also it's got to help marketers talk about the importance of advertising to non-marketing executives in their business. So, the idea is to say, why do we need to advertise? Well, only a small proportion of buyers are in the market in any given period of time. We could talk about a week, we could talk about a month, talk about a quarter. A minority are in the market. So what that means is, well, firstly, it tells us, well, what should advertising do? And there's a role for some advertising and some marketing activity to hit people who are in the market now, to kind of convert them and pull them in. But obviously, most of the effects of advertising, well, most of the reach, most of the impressions it creates, is to people who are not in the market now. So we can't think our advertising is meant to drive people to us, because most of the people who see it, they're not ready to buy. So its role is to create memory structures, favorable impressions about our brand and its link to the product category that we're selling, to make a memory imprint that will then be activated later when they come into the market. So that's the idea, is for marketers to better understand what their advertising is meant to be doing, but also a really simple rationale for non-marketing people in the business as to why do we need to spend all this money on advertising?
And why do we need to spend money on advertising? Well, we want to grow our business. We want to grow our revenue.
Yes.
The numbers you said about where you kind of did the math down to a month, are they kind of actual findings as well?
Yes. I mean, you can do any sort of survey, so anybody can do this for their own category. If they, survey, clients or potential clients and just ask simple questions like, on average, how often do you review your requirements or, call for tenders, or like say if it's, like you have an advertising agency, how often do you call an agency review? And if the answer is, and obviously some businesses review more frequently, some businesses review less frequently. But if the average is something like, say, every 2 years or every 3 years, then you simply convert that to, well, what will that mean for the incidence of customers who will be entering the market in any given, say, month or a quarter, any sort of managerially meaningful time period.
Okay. And how does this translate into how we should be thinking about our marketing in general, or like the deployment of budgets, the activities that we plan throughout a year?
Yes. That's a good question.
Or does the work start even before that, about kind of actually defining the market that you're trying to address? Or in B2B, we talk about the accounts that we want to reach. There's a certain kind of addressable market out there, or what you're thinking there?
Well, so a few things. So number one, the idea of 95.5 helps us to be realistic about what marketing can do in a time period. Like, in a sense, there is a constraint in terms of like how many new clients we can acquire or how many sales we can generate in a time period, like if, let's say, if only 5% of potential accounts are in the market in any given, say, month, well, that means that's kind of the upper limit. We can get our share of that, or even maybe more than our share of that.
Yeah.
But we can't. It tells us that we have to be realistic about how much marketing can achieve in a short time period. And it also tells us things like, well, how big, how many potential category buyers are there out there? And then if we know, well, let's say there's 2,000, in any given quarter, sort of about 5% are in the market. Well, that tells us, the potential target in any given quarter is, whatever 5% of 2,000 is.
Yeah.
And so that helps us to understand things like sales force allocation and maybe how much advertising we need to spend. Because the idea of 95/5 also, so it tells us something important about the necessity of reach.
Yeah.
Right. So, we were sort of talking through a thread earlier on about, you need to advertise in order to grow. And if we can just take that back a little bit to say, so how can a business grow? Well, we know that growth in B2B, as is the case in consumer markets, when you grow, you grow via getting better at customer acquisition.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Even growing brands lose customers. You can't go from being a small brand to a big brand by being super great at customer retention. I mean, it's nice.
Yeah.
But that's not how you'll grow.
And you've just told me that the net having really happy customers doesn't help you extremely accelerate either.
That's right. So you need to acquire new customers.
Yeah.
Most of them are not in the market now, and it's probably fair to say many of them have never heard of you before.
Yeah.
So I guess the question turns, well, if there are potential buyers out there who basically know nothing about us, they have almost zero chance of buying from us, but they'll probably know about one or other competitors, so they're quite likely to buy from them. So how can we possibly get a chance of making a sale amongst these potential buyers who don't currently deal with us, don't really care too much about us, don't even know about us? And the answer is, well, we have to advertise. And we need to think about, well, we need to reach them with an advertising message. And it turns out that the greatest kind of like incremental impact of an advertising exposure is the first one, right? When somebody has had no advertising exposures about your brand in a time period, be it a quarter or a year or whatever, the greatest incremental impact is taking them from 0 to 1 exposures. Hitting somebody for the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th time with an ad exposure or a sales call or whatever, the incremental impact is very much attenuated. So as a marketer, I need to think, right, there's a pool of 2,000 potential buyers out there. In order for me to have a chance of winning some sales from them, I need them, like my chances will be massively upweighted if they know something about me, they've had some exposure. So I need to deploy advertising in a cost-efficient way to take them from like 0 exposures in a time period to at least 1 exposure in a time period.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the main changes in how I think about B2B marketing that I have come to realize reading your book. That kind of this in B2B, you kind of have also the saying that you need a very high frequency because it's complex products you're trying to sell. It takes a long time, and you need to make sure that ad frequency is very, very consistently high. But you actually, but for an efficiency point of view, in the money you spend on your marketing budget, it's better to show the ad one time to another person rather than showing the same ad to the same person 2 times. That's the simplified version, right?
Pretty much, yeah. That's right.
Feel free to correct me, John, if I'm overly simplifying here.
I think that's fine, but yeah, maybe let me just go over that again, because I think it's an important point, and it's really simple, but it's a really kind of like fundamental idea, which is it's probably fair to say that lots of B2B marketing operations, or indeed sales teams, there's a tendency to, focus attention on the accounts that we know, the accounts that know us, the accounts that might be friendly to us, and so on, and we get ongoing business from them, and there is a customer retention function. That's great, but we have to think, like, we need to like question ourselves and say, of all of the marketing effort that we're expending, how much are we expending on people who are already buying from us versus expending on people who are not currently buying from us and don't know nothing about us? So maybe we need to think about reorienting and saying, well, if we want to grow and there are thousands of potential customers out there who know nothing about us, maybe rather than hitting these accounts for the 5th, 6th, 7th time, maybe I can take some of that money and start hitting people for the first time. I mean, the incidence with which I'm going to get sales from them is fairly low, but I can still hit a lot of potential customers with that sort of mindset.
Super interesting. And one of the things that is like a key concept in that concept is also the qualified buyer, meaning that I guess you guys are not saying reach as many people as possible, but reach as many qualified buyers as possible. So how do you what would you define as a is it the correct term, qualified buyer, or is it
we would say just category buyers.
Buyers. Okay.
So a business that is, that you can logically or reasonably say, like, this is a potential category buyer. Not so much a qualified buyer, which would kind of indicate perhaps they're going to be coming into the market very, very soon. So
category buyer.
We need to understand who are the people who buy this category, and it could be, if I'm selling, I don't know, insurance services for businesses. Well, I mean, our target universe is basically all businesses will potentially be in the market for say business insurance. So that helps me to understand, like, how many potential buyers there are out there. Now let's just mention something that's popped up in the comments, is the idea of reaching all category buyers. We're not talking about trying to do it all at once. The idea is, from knowing about 95.5, that most people aren't in the market now, and probably most people won't be in the market next month or the month after that, right? It's a long-term process. So what that means is, I've only got a finite amount of money to spend. I can't blow it in one time period, right? So if I go big and I expend all of my money in Q1 trying to reach as many people as possible, unfortunately, what that will do is I'll kind of shoot myself in the foot, because if I concentrate my spending, I'm going to drive frequency up. So I'm going to hit too many people multiple times.
Yeah.
So the idea is, I've only got so much money, but the most cost-efficient way to deploy it is spread it out over time, knowing that in any given month, sure, I can't hit everybody, but the idea is to maximize the number of people or potential clients that I can hit over a long period, like a year or something like that.
Wonderful. So there's another question. It's a bit longer, so I'll just read it out and allow you to think through while I read it. So it's Matt. He's saying, "Hi, John. What advice do you give brand leaders who are aligned on the 95.5 rule and growing mental availability, but they need to find a way to quantify the value of mental availability growth to audiences like finance?" I think you probably had that question a few times before. How do you go and explain this to the people that runs budgets in companies?
Yeah. Let me just think about this for a second. I mean, that's.
So here, like what you couldn't see on the screen is Matt also writes, if I give you $1, what am I getting back and when?
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so that's kind of like the marketing ROI argument. Yeah. All right. So, I think if I can put it this way, which might sound heretical, okay, but I think the best thing that marketers can probably do is not try and mount the ROI argument. So, but rather to do it in a different way, which is just an appeal to logic with using sort of some evidentiary facts. So it is the case that a lot of marketing directors will try and mount an argument such as, we've done modeling and it shows that our marketing activity has a high ROI. In fact, I've seen some work from some sponsors that said it came out of an analytics section that we have an ROI of 7 to 1. So for every dollar we spend on marketing, we get a $7 return.
Sounds nice.
Which I got to admit, I think if you're a finance person or a seasoned CEO, you go like, I don't believe that, because, well, particularly it's the case if you say, okay, marketing, you're telling me I get a $7 to $1 ROI. Why aren't we growing? I'm giving you, here's this money. You're saying there's a 700% return on it. Yet our market share isn't going through the roof. It's sort of about the same as it was last year. How can there be a 7 to 1 ROI? Yeah. I don't think it's a compelling argument, and I think unfortunately what it does is it's falsely attributing all sales to the effect of certain bits of marketing activity.
We're great at marketing.
And I think if I can use an analogy, it's not mine, but it might have even featured in Harvard Business Review. But the story is this, right? There's a pizza shop owner, and he decided that a good way to drive sales would be to hire 3 people to give out pamphlets with a $2 off coupon. So he hired 3 people to give out these coupons, and he said, you can do whatever way you want, letterbox drops, etc., etc. And after a month, he noticed that, and they had a code on the coupons to identify, well, which of the 3 staff was the most efficient. And it turned out so that one of the staff, Stefan, was the most efficient. And he had a meeting, and he said, Stefan, your conversion rate for your coupons is fantastic. In fact, we've got a 700% ROI on it. What's your secret? And Stefan said, my secret is stand out the front of the pizza shop.
Yeah.
Right?
You want a $2 off the pizza you're about to buy.
They're attributing sales to the brochure for sales that would have happened anyway. So I think we have to be careful about an ROI argument. But I think I can give you like a practical example of a path that we've set out on recently. So we've tried to do that kind of spreadsheet exercise of how many category buyers is there for our industry. Yeah.
And we found a number around like 16,000 accounts in the markets that we're interested in. And then we're measuring how many of these accounts are we reaching per quarter. And we're reaching like somewhere between 50 and 70% of these accounts at the current ad spend. So the conversation that Matt, who wrote, if that's him, and he can go to whoever is handing out the budgets, he can still go out and say, there's 30% left of the market which I can't afford for us to reach. Do you want me to go after another 30% of our category buyers? Because right now I don't have the budget to actually get in front of them, which means the sales team could be in front of 30% more accounts. So that's kind of a practical number that we've started to monitor, saying that there's this defined market. Our ads is getting in front of X amount of the accounts, and I want more budget because I need to be reaching all of these accounts.
Yes. I mean, yeah, that's right. So I think that's helpful to understand, like, how many have we reached, in a time period, and even let's say a year. Okay, we've reached 70%. Reach keeps accumulating. So, the idea ideally would be, even if we don't spend more money, hopefully by 18 months, our cumulative reach has gone to 80 or maybe 90. So maybe we can't hit everybody every year, but at least if we think over a longer time period, maybe 100% has been reached once every 2 years or 2.5 years or something like that. And then often it's the case that, a B2B company will say, look, I've only got so many reps, salespeople. I can't have them visit every potential account. I just don't have enough.
Yeah.
But then that opens a conversation around, well, are there other ways that you can cost efficiently reach, potential clients? Be it it's not face to face, but can we use video? Can we use mechanisms like this to reach in other non-personal ways to at least impart a memory impression?
Yeah. And I think that's probably like a side note here is just to be successful with marketing in general, you need to be very proactive about the conversation in your company. So like, don't be taken unprepared.
Yes.
You constantly need to educate the organization about we're doing this because X, Y, Z, and the reasoning is this. And because if you just wait for finance to react, you end up with marketing being slashed with 50% because you didn't invest the time in educating the rest of the organization.
Yes. So actually, sorry. So to turn back to finish answering the question around, how do I convince non-marketing audience about the value of mental availability? I think it's it's an education process, but with very elemental concepts. So the CFO, CEO, whoever else in the business is just understand, some really simple facts about the marketplace. And I think once they hear them, I think if they're reasonable, they go, well, yeah, I get that, but maybe stitching the logic together would be helpful. Okay, so firstly, we exist in a competitive environment. Our buyers and our potential buyers, they all have choices. Like there are plenty of alternatives to us.
Yeah,
we all agree on that? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got good products. Our competitors have got good products. We've got smart marketing team. Our competitors have got smart marketing teams. So our buyers can buy from us. They can buy from competitors.
Yeah.
What maximizes the probability or the chance that they will buy from us? And the answer is, well, they have almost no chance of buying from us if they don't know about us, right? And we can say to the CFO, like, last time you did something, you had your car serviced or whatever. Did you, choose to purchase from a brand that you knew or a brand that you don't know? So all this evidence says buyers like familiarity. They use their memories when they make purchasing decisions, and they typically have very small consideration sets or small short lists, right? Typically 2 to 3, and we've done some work on this. So in B2B, the short list is 2 to 3.
Yeah.
So then the question is, if we're a small brand, why are we small? Is it because we got on the short list of a lot of companies, but we got knocked out because we weren't good enough? No, it's not that. It's because we didn't make the short list at all to begin with, not even considered. So therefore, logically, what do we have to do to grow? The answer is, well, to be known more.
Yeah.
Right. To be known more, which means we get on more short lists, which means we have a higher chance of getting decided. So that's the rationale for advertising, is to convert people who know nothing about us to at least knowing something about us, because they'll use that memory when they do come into the market.
Absolutely. What if I asked you the inverse question? So when do I know if I have enough marketing budget? Or kind of, is there a way to kind of like rule of thumb for when you can kind of be satisfied with the marketing work that you're doing?
Good question. I mean, I don't know that you'd ever get a marketing director on the planet that would say, I got enough, I don't need more.
No.
I mean, even, Ehrenberg-Bass sponsors, who are, some of the biggest corporations in the world, they will say, no, we're short of funds. We'd really like more, because even if you have like a lot of money to spend, it means you've got a lot of work to do. You've got a lot of markets to cover, a lot of consumers to reach, a lot of buyers to reach, and even big companies with lots of money have competitors who are also big with lots of money. So it's a competitive process. There's always jostling for market share.
I didn't consider the competitive element, but that's true, because you might feel that you have a big budget, but then you might sponsor the Little League, but your competitors sponsored the Super Bowl, and now they gain mental availability over you.
Yes. So, you can kind of think, I can cost efficiently, in a sense, buy or generate mental availability. And we talk about, spending to boost mental availability and physical availability, making ourselves easy to think of, easy to buy. And the amount of money that you've got will, get you some level of that. And that will, in a sense, be enough to buy you some level of market share.
That's so interesting.
But your competitors that spend 10 times as much, presumably they will be much, much bigger.
But that makes also it's marketing like a holistic part of the rest of the business, meaning that can you cut cost in the way you produce your product so you get some extra money available here that you can then invest in outspending your competition to be the one that gets on top of the list, that when you're kind of fighting for mental availability.
Sorry, you were saying how do you find the extra money?
No, I was saying, so like to win in a certain industry, it might also be that you can, save money on rent, save money on salaries, produce your product more effectively, so you generate a bigger plus on the bottom line, which you then again can go out and invest in acquiring new customers.
Yes, I think perhaps one way to think about it is to think, well, we can either spend more money, or maybe we can look at, like, how can we spend the money that we've got more effectively? So let's think about, can we get better at, 1+, taking people from 0 to 1 reach? Are we using the right media? Like, are we maybe, there are some cost inefficiencies in the media that we're buying, so let's look at that. Let's look at the quality of our creative, because we have to be very, very diligent to make sure that our creative is imparting the right memory structures.
Yeah.
So if we say, look, advertising is largely about creating relevant memory structures for the brand via what we call category entry points. So are we hitting the right category entry points? And then lastly, are we being diligent and almost fanatical about the extent to which we use our what we call distinctive brand assets, which is the features of our advertising that tie the brand to us, that make it unequivocally the case that people will recognize, like, that piece of advertising is for that brand, and that helps entrench the memory structures. And it's fair to say that a lot of advertising, both in B2B and in consumer markets, its use of distinctive brand assets could be better. I mean, it's a reasonable piece of logic to say it's difficult for advertising to have a favorable effect on a client or a sponsor, a client or a prospect, if they don't know who, or don't recall who the ad was for. And misattribution of brands in advertising can easily be 50%. So you do a survey, you show people an unbranded ad, and you say, "Have you seen that?" "Yes." "Who's it for?"
No
50% of people get it wrong. Then that would tell you, I can get better at my market. I can get better at the efficiency of my marketing spend if I get better at my distinctive assets, like deploying them and building them consistently. So there's a lot of ways in which you can get more efficiency from your marketing spend. If you can do that, in theory, you can spend the same, get a bit more sales, reinvest the increment into more marketing activity, grow sales a little bit more, so bootstrap yourself to a higher level of market share over a period of years.
Really cool. Can you just maybe say a few more, or maybe give some examples of distinctive assets, just for all of us who are now panicking whether we're distinctive enough?
Sure. I mean, distinctive brand assets can be it's everything that's not the brand name itself that make the brand kind of like easily able to link in people's memory. So that can be logos, typefaces, colors, characters, the style of advertising. So if you develop a consistent advertising style over a long period of time, then you're educating the market that, oh, that ad is for that brand in all sorts of, in all sorts of ways. So like the Michelin Man is a, classic example of a, distinctive asset, or the Unilever logo, or pharmaceutical company logos and things like that.
So is it actually bad to change your brand around too much then?
Usually it's very bad, because it's certainly the case that too many marketing people want to change the brand's distinctive assets because they're bored with it. New marketing director, they want to make their mark. Let's change things. Let's do a brand refresh.
That's funny.
Usually a terrible idea, because you've spent maybe 20 years educating people that this brand, this like advertising that looks like this, is for this brand. And then you throw that away by changing the brand assets.
That's so funny, because I think all marketers are a lot of marketers are creative people, and repeating the same things is a struggle, and then they suddenly end up changing their website, or they change the color or the logo or something like that.
And it's because as marketers, we think a lot more about our brands than what customers do. We're looking at it and thinking about it every day. But our brands are a tiny little part of our customers' lives. They don't get bored with them. They hardly notice them. It's very, very hard to get people to even notice them. So the argument that, potential buyers are maybe bored with the way that we present ourselves, like, no, that's not a good reason. That's really definitely, we want to build our brand assets over long periods of time.
So there's one, if you don't have any distinct brand assets, start thinking a bit more original. But once you have it, don't change it, because then you have to start all over again.
Yes, that's right.
Samantha's asking a question which we've been alluding a little bit around, which is, could you arm us B2B folks with some terminology to wield against those non-marketing executives who are hell-bent on retention or upselling current customers? So I guess it's this kind of, if you have a marketing budget, do you spend it on the present customers, or do you spend it on acquiring new customers? We have been talking a little bit about it, but what should Samantha do here?
Great. Okay. Certainly, this is a common marketing misconception that that I should focus, that it's easy or it's desirable to grow by selling more to current customers. So, what are the problems with that? Okay. Firstly, all the empirical evidence is that businesses that grow, they grow by acquiring new customers. That's how they grow. There are not documented cases of businesses that grew markedly by getting better at cross-selling. Okay. Secondly, the evidence is that competing firms or businesses in a market, they tend to be about as good as each other at retention and cross-selling. And in fact, retention or cross-selling rates follow the famous law of double jeopardy. The big players are big, they've got many more customers, and they get a little bit more loyalty from them. The small brands suffer twice, they've got fewer customers, and the customers buy from them somewhat less. So that's kind of like an iron law of the market, double jeopardy. So if I'm a small brand and I want to grow, it's tempting to think, well, my current customers know me, so I can grow by selling them more. But the problem is you can't, because you already sell to them. They already buy from you. there's not that much more they can do to allocate you more of their requirements. And it's natural buyer behavior to spread requirements out among multiple competing alternatives. So, for argument's sake, we've looked at this. Say, if I use the example of banking, okay, people who deal with, people who have, like, say, one financial product, right? They're very light users of the category. On average, they have one bank, of course, one product, one bank.
Yeah.
People who have two financial products, they tend to deal with maybe like 1.5 banks. By the time you look at people who have 6 or 7 or 8 financial products, in other words, they're quite heavy users of the category, they deal with 3 or 4 banks, right? So that the heavier you are a user of the product category, your natural tendency is to use more providers. So the idea from a marketing point of view, what I should do is, isolate heavy buyers of the category and try and win them with a loyalty strategy. It doesn't work. You can't get big buyers of the category to allocate all of their requirements. Why would they do that? In fact, lots of businesses say, like, I've got quotas. I won't allocate more than, say, 30% of my requirements to any one supplier because I start to be more, unduly reliant on them. So yeah, we should be good at cross-selling. We should be alert to cross-selling opportunities. But the idea that we can grow by selling more and more to existing customers, it literally doesn't work. All the evidence is that brands don't grow that way.
Okay, I hope, Samantha, you listen tightly. And
thank you, Samantha.
You can send them the link of this conversation as well.
Yes.
John, time is flying so fast.
Yes.
There's a million questions more that I want to get into, but I think we should maybe return to the starting point of the 95-5 rule and what it means in B2B. So maybe can I ask you to kind of maybe summarize what, if you respect that there's something called the 95-5 rule, which I think we can all agree that not everybody is buying right now. Yeah. What are the most important notions or insights you should take from this? And what is it that you should change about how you do marketing today?
Yeah, good question. I would say, firstly, stop evaluating advertising on sales results. Okay, that seems to be a logical fallacy, right? Because marketing team, or maybe the finance team or general management say, we spent money on an advertising campaign, not much happened to sales. Well, advertising doesn't work, so we're not going to do that again. 95-5 rule would say, no, you're misinterpreting, right? Because not much happened to sales now, because only 5% or 8% or whatever of buyers are actually in the market now. Yeah. The effects of advertising, as Byron has said many times over the last decades, the effects of advertising are like thinly spread out over time. So we can't use sales to judge the effectiveness of our advertising. We have to accept that a big role for advertising is influencing memory structures. And so if we're serious, we need to do some measurement work to see if our advertising is influencing buyer memories, which means doing some professionally constructed surveys amongst the target population.
That was the question I was sitting with immediately. So if we say we can't look at sales immediately, what are kind of, maybe just take a step further into kind of what are the kind of metrics or the leading indicators that we did spend the money in a sensible way? Yeah.
Well, I think there are two parts to it. So one of my colleagues, Jenny Romanick, has actually written a great book about this called Better Brand Health. So that talks about how you construct surveys to tap this notion of category entry points, which is like identifying the relevant memory structures or memory associations that you would want your advertising to imparting, and then via surveys working out, well, is it working? So, what is my brand's, what we call mental market share? mental penetration, network size. So this gives us in a very granular way the metrics for me to understand how well is my advertising working? Like, are people noticing it? And then is it imparting the right memory structures and impressions about my brand? So that's a
Super
formal.
nice. John, can I just get you to repeat the name of your colleague and the book?
Yes.
So I want to buy it, but
Sure.
I'm sure people listening also think
Yes.
about it.
So it's a Professor Jenny Romanek, and the book is called Better Brand Health. Great book. Jenny's been
Super nice.
doing, brand health metrics and tracking for decades. So it's packed with experience and practical ideas about how to do this work. So that's the survey route. Then the other thing is, to return to some of the themes we talked about before, which is, you can look at your advertising, look at the marketing activities that you're doing, and just question it and say, like, amongst ourselves, does this look like us? So is it, unmistakably us, or would people be exposed to this advertising and really not know who it's for? Is it linking us to the category, or is it some vague and amorphous message that is not going to leave a favorable memory impression? What media are we using to deploy those messages? And then lastly, how many people are we managing to reach? Which is a theme we've talked on. And are we using media that it's accumulating frequency with some buyers but not reaching others, in which case there's a big opportunity there to deploy our marketing money in a way more efficient manner. And if the answer is I don't know what my reach is via my advertising, well, I've got to find out. I've got to employ an agency, or I've got to interrogate, I've got to dig deeper, because it's such a key metric. I can't expect to grow if I don't know how many buyers or potential buyers I'm reaching.
It's so nice. Sometimes I do that kind of fun exercise, both with our own website and our own assets, that if I put a finger on the brand name,
Right.
Does this look memorable, distinct, or could it be any B2B brand out there? Kind of, we help you grow revenue and cut costs, or like some kind of that generic language that doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
Try just putting your finger on where your brand name is and see whether it actually still generates some kind of associations to what you do.
I mean, it could be, like, in a sense, precisely what you say or the way that you say it matters less than just presenting it in a distinctive way, a distinctive or a memorable way. So I don't know, like I'm in a business banking, well, our business banking products and services are pretty much the same as all of our competitors. So, we talk about trade finance. We are in the business of setting up access to trade finance for your business operations in North America and Asia or whatever. Like, the question is, so what you're doing is very much the same as competitors, but simply, can you say that in a memorable, entertaining, or watchable way that imparts an impression of, the sorts of memory impressions that you want to create, but also that people go, oh no, that's HSBC, because that's the way that they say that. Or no, that's Chase. They've got a way of saying, they're saying sort of similar things, but they just say them in different ways that are interesting and memorable.
Just do it.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's right.
John, we're out of time. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to share all this knowledge with us. If people want to know more about you, or they want to follow your institute, or they want to even take a course with you, kind of what path should they go on?
So we've got a public-facing website, the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute for Marketing Science. Myself and my colleagues are very active on LinkedIn, so easy to link to us. Now, if there are watchers of the podcast who are interested in kind of more information and at a kind of a deeper level, the Institute is offering 3 kind of exciting events in 2025, which are 3-day intensives called How Brands Grow for Executives. The first one kicks off pretty soon, actually, in Singapore. Then there's one in Bordeaux, followed by one in Boston. So, if you're interested in growing your business, growing your brand, register for How Brands Grow for Executives. Really exciting 3-day intensives with none other than Professors Byron Sharp and Jenny Romanek.
Super nice. John, thank you so much for taking the time. To those of you who are listening, if you'd like this conversation, we actually have a library of almost 200 more conversations with people who know stuff about B2B marketing and go-to-market. So go search for Attributed where you listen to podcasts, and you'll find many more conversations like this. John, thank you so much for joining from the other side of the
My
planet.
pleasure.
And to everybody who's listening, thank you so much for spending the time with me and